Today we are going to talk about a lesson, Communication Patterns, which is part of Social Psychology paper. The main objectives in this lesson are to understand the process of communication, then the patterns of communication. The patterns of communication here include wheel pattern, chain pattern, Y pattern, circle pattern. Then we are going to talk about effectiveness of these communication patterns. The essence of human social interaction is communication. In fact, the main feature that differentiates human beings to other species is the ability to communicate on structured symbol level using formal language. As you know, animals do not use the structured formal language. Therefore, language, which is an important element of communication, is unique to only human beings. Communication can be stated as a unique social process because it is very important for people to be able to communicate their feelings, thoughts, attitudes and opinions for implementation of their social activities. Without sharing their feelings and experiences, people cannot maintain their social relations. You must have noticed people who have difficulty in sharing their feelings and thoughts are generally less active socially, and people who openly share their feelings, thoughts and opinions openly are more active socially. Communication consists of different methods which people use to convey intended and also sometimes unintended messages to others. What is intended message? The message a person is attempting to send is what we call as the intended message. These messages are generally conveyed through verbal communication such as emails, legal notices, etc. The message which are not planned or not deliberate are known as unintended messages. For example, when a person in a meeting lets their eyes wander here and there rather than looking at the person who is speaking is sending an unintended message that they are not listening. And also another example is the person that answers every question with a question sends the unintended message that they have something to hide. With reference to psychology, the term communication refers to exchange of ideas, thoughts, emotions and experiences between people. Communication also includes not only the interaction but also the process by which meanings of the messages are perceived and how people understand the message. For example, when two people are interacting like teacher and a student communication, it refers to information shared by the teacher and also how the student perceives and understands the information. Therefore, in communication process, not just the message is important, but it is also essential that the correct meaning of the message has to be conveyed to the person. In this social interaction, the process of communication has a vital role to play. It is a continuous process which mainly involves three elements. Those are sender, message and receiver. Next, we will understand in detail the whole process of communication which consists of various steps. So, here you can see in the picture various elements like sender, receiver, message, etc. This figure shows the steps of communication process. These steps are important in order to achieve a successful communication. Let's now come into detail of these steps. First one is sender. A sender is the source of the message that is generated to be delivered to the receiver through the appropriate channel. Sender is the one who starts the communication. The next step is encoding. This refers to transforming the thoughts of the information to be conveyed into a form that can be sent, such as words, pictures, gestures, etc. The next one is message. This refers to the information to be conveyed. It could be ideas, views, facts or even feelings. It is generated by the sender and is then intended to be communicated further. The fourth step is channel of communication. Channel of communication must be selected. It is a manner in which the message is sent. Channels of communication include speaking, writing, video transmission, audio transmission, electronic transmission through emails and text, messages, and even non-verbal communication such as body language. The channel of communication is generally decided by the sender. Then comes the next step, which is receiver. This is the last person in the chain and for whom the message was sent by the sender. Once the receiver receives the message and understands it in the proper perspective and acts according to the message, only then the purpose of communication is successful. For this, proper decoding of message has to be done by the receiver. The next step is decoding. The receiver must be able to decode the message, which means mentally processing the message into understanding. If the message cannot be decoded, the communication fails. For example, sending the message in foreign language that is not understood by the receiver may result in decode failure. Then the next one is feedback. Once the receiver confirms to the sender that he or she has received the message and understood it, the process of communication is complete. The feedback can also be in the form of questions or non-verbal communication such as nodding the head. Then connecting all these steps is another aspect, which is noise. Noise refers to any obstruction that is caused by the sender, message or receiver during the process of communication. For example, bad telephone connection, faulty encoding, faulty decoding, inattentive receiver, or poor understanding of message due to prejudice or inappropriate gestures, etc. Now, let me explain to you the process of communication taking the example of teaching learning process. Right now, I am your teacher and you are my student. That means I am the sender who is giving you the information and you are the receiver who will take this information. The message is conveyed here is the information about the lesson patterns of communication. I have encoded my thoughts about this topic and put them into words. The channel through which I am communicating with you is in two forms. First, when you are watching the video, the channel of communication will be the electronic media. Second, when you read the lesson, it will be in print. Nevertheless, you might use internet to either see or read information about this particular lesson. Hence, the main channel of communication can be the digital media. Next, the receiver, which is you, will receive the message by properly decoding the information. If there is a problem in decoding, the information may not be understood by you correctly. This might happen if I use difficult language when I am explaining the topic. Only when you understand the information, the communication is effective and I can say that I am successful in teaching you the topic. Feedback here can come in the form of questions you pose to the teacher. In a classroom setup, generally, when you nod your head, it helps the teacher to know that you have understood the topic or you are listening to the topic. Then finally, talking about the noise in the communication process. As already told, it refers to the disturbance in the process, like bad internet connection, or say if you don't like me, then also you might not listen to the lesson properly. This also refers to noise. It also refers to the physiological aspects, such as say for example, presently if you are hungry or tired, the processing might not happen correctly. Thus, the correct process of communication is essential for the message to reach effectively. In a social group, people communicate in various patterns, sometimes which are also referred to as communication network. A communication network is a pattern of direction in which information flows in a group. These patterns and also various aspects of pattern indicate how message travel from one person to another person, thus conveying the right message. Now next we will see what are these patterns of communication. Rather than being free flow, when the communication flows through a system or a pattern, it is referred to as a pattern of communication. These are regular patterns of people to people relationship through which information flows in a social group. This means that the flow of information is managed, regulated and structured. Generally, in an organization, the patterns are related to work efficiency and who is responsible towards whom or who talks to whom. It is also related to satisfaction of the group members and decision making process. This is also applied to social groups. There are various patterns of communication. These different patterns of communication which we will learn in this lesson are wheel pattern, chain pattern, Y pattern and circle pattern. Apart from these, all to one communication and one to all communication are also taken as communication patterns. When many people give information to one person, it is all-to-one communication. For example, when employees of the company are protesting, they all want to send information to the owner of the company about their grievance, complaints, etc. The next example can be a group of people giving farewell to a particular person. They may communicate it through a card or a farewell party. Then next, if one person provides information to many, it is one-to-all communication. For example, speeches, here one person is communicating to many people. Also, a teacher is teaching the lesson, will be one-to-all communication because teacher is one and students are many. Coming to other patterns, Harold J. Leavitt in 1950 described some other major types of communication patterns. First, we will talk about wheel pattern. In this platform, one member of the group has a very centralized position. If you can see the figure where A is the member who is in the center, all the other members B, C, D and E stand at the same level in the structure. Here only A is allowed to communicate with other members of the group, but the other members cannot interact with each other. Sometimes members don't even know the existence of other members of the same group. Say for example, when you have a college festival, the management appoints a coordinator who can be termed as A, and students from different faculties, like for example BA is B, BCom is C, BSc D and BTech E. All these groups of students communicate only with the coordinator for their permissions and other issues. This one person A, who is the coordinator of the college festival, has to know everything related to the festival such as finances, events, timings, etc. and relays all the messages to the respective student groups. Students here basically have no need to communicate with other faculty students. Now let me tell you about the advantages of wheel patterns of communication. Wheel pattern is a fast means of getting information from the members, since the person at the centralized place can do it directly and efficiently. Then communication problems in these patterns are less and the method is very quick. There is also no distortion of information by other members of the group while passing the message. However, you might also face some disadvantages while using this type of communication. The disadvantages are this pattern of communication may not be appropriate for every situation or basically for a group where many people are present. It also leads to problem if that one centralized person is not responsible, dedicated or communicative. The next we are going to talk about is the chain pattern. You can see the figure which has both vertical chain and also the horizontal chain. The chain pattern of communication can be both, as I told you, both vertical and horizontal. Individuals in this pattern communicate in a set sequence. Information is passed straight up or down in the line for vertical chain or left to right in line for horizontal chain. From the above figure we can see if member A have to pass the information down, it has to go through B, C and then reaches the member D. Similarly, if the member D has to share information to A, it has to again pass through C and B. Thus, members A and D cannot have a direct contact. The communication pattern is indeed like a chain in that the information from top of the chain has to go through each individual link before getting to the end. Chain pattern of communication usually is very relevant in a group where hierarchy is very strong. Now, for example, a CEO of a company will talk to the manager that is next in the hierarchy, but generally does not talk to the clerk at the bottom of the hierarchy. Now, let us try to understand if chain pattern is useful or how useful it is. The chain pattern of communication has certain advantages. The chain pattern of communication is useful when passing messages which are legally correct, as they cannot be distorted. Chain pattern can also be used when passing information which is verifiable. Therefore, it is more useful in organizations. When we come to the disadvantages, the chain pattern, though useful in organization, can be a disadvantageous in social interaction. Do you remember playing the game telephone when you were young? You tell a person a message and they tell another person the same message, but by the time it gets to the last person, the message is altered. Everyone perceives information differently. So, the more people are involved in the chain, the more the message gets altered. For example, gossips about people generally pass through chain pattern of communication and they are usually distorted information. Then we move on to Y pattern of communication. In this type of communication pattern, one person becomes more central than any other. The member at the fork of the Y usually becomes the central person in the communication process. The Y pattern is actually similar to chain except that two members fall outside the chain. In Y pattern, for example, C and D can send information to A. Further, A can send information to B. Here, B can receive or send information only to A. For example, in the university, there are two vice principals who can be C and D in the picture, report to the principal who is A. The principal in turn reports to vice chancellor of the university who can be termed as B. Coming to the benefits of Y pattern of communication, it can be said that the Y communication pattern is faster than the chain pattern. As it is more centralized, it is more efficient. Then as every pattern has some disadvantages, the Y pattern also has following demerits. The messages can be distorted because of centralization. Members will be more dissatisfied in this particular type of communication. The next type of pattern is the circle pattern. As you can see in the figure, it is in the form of a circle. The circle pattern gives every member equal communication opportunities. Each member can communicate with the person to their right and the left. In this pattern, no one is central and communication is allowed to flow in all directions. Each member of the circle has exactly the same authority or power to influence the group. This network is similar to chain network except that information which flows in a circular direction rather than a vertical direction. A can communicate simultaneously with two people, B and E, but to communicate with D, he has to pass the message through B or E and C. All 5 persons cannot directly communicate with each other. In a circle network, the lowest level worker can communicate with the top manager. If A could be the top manager and B could be the lowest level worker, for example, they too can communicate. So therefore, the formal claim of command thus is not respected in this network. The example of this pattern can be apartment society where no one is a leader and everyone takes the decisions. Coming to the advantages. The main advantage in this pattern is the morale of the members is high as everyone takes part in the decision making process. The disadvantage is the information moves very slowly. The information can also be distorted in this particular pattern. After seeing various communication patterns, now we will try to understand how effective these communication patterns are. The importance of communication patterns lies in its potential effects on the variables such as speed, accuracy, morale, leadership, stability, organization and flexibility. Various studies have been done here and studies in communication patterns show that the effectiveness of the pattern depends on situational factors. Using various communication patterns, researchers have tried to find their impact on group performance both in terms of achieving goals and its ability to satisfy the members of the group. The first systematic research on communication pattern was conducted by an American organizational psychologist Harold J. Levitt and Alex Bevalis in the 1950s. Their work was stimulated by formal mathematical models derived from graph theory. By placing partitions between participants seated at the table, Levitt and Bevalis manipulated the communication structures within the group of varying sizes. For example, they took a group of 5 people which could communicate within the circular structure in which each person could only share messages with those on either side. Alternatively, communication could take place within the structure of a wheel where one member becomes a central who is known as a hub through which all communications must pass. In this study, it was found that communication pattern such as circle is characterized by slow flow of communication and inefficiency in terms of problem solving, but it produces greater satisfaction for the group members because they participate almost equally in the communication flow. The highly centralized patterns such as wheel pattern or you can say Y pattern are characterized by higher efficiency but less satisfaction because everybody does not have an equal opportunity to participate in decision making. Levitt also reported that although highly centralized patterns tend to be efficient in terms of task oriented behavior, they bring about errors made by the people in those centralized position. Because there is one person who is in centralized position, If they do not work properly, it becomes very difficult for the communication process. They can send in wrong messages. In another study, during the same time, American social psychologist named Marvin E. Shaw found that centralized groups solve relatively simple problems better than decentralized groups. When problems become more complex, however, Shaw found that centralization can hamper problem solving. Most of the research on small group decision making from years 1950 through 1980s was conducted in groups with symmetrical communication networks in which each member's communication were received by the entire group. Bibb Latané, an American psychologist, and his colleagues revived interest in communication networks in late 1980s by pointing out that individual members of large groups cannot easily communicate with the entire group at the same time. Latané developed what came to be known as dynamic social impact theory. It includes a principle of immediacy, which assumes that influence between any two members in a group is predicted by the likelihood that they can easily share communication. That means, if I can easily communicate with you, I can also influence you easily. The results of Latané's study revealed that opinions were either maintained or changed as a function of the strength, immediacy, and the number of other members in the group. In addition to this, two significant group level phenomena emerged through this study. First, whichever opinion was almost commonly held within the group became the decision later. That is, the opinion of the majority prevailed. I am sure you must have encountered such situations many times where you have to conform to the majority opinion. Then the second thing which came out is, as communication patterns constrained communication, opinions also become regionally clustered, such that members shared opinions with other members who were physically close to them. Suppose, for example, if you live in an apartment complex, generally we share information with people who are next to you in the same floor rather than with someone who is in another floor. In addition to Latané's study, it is also been found by other researchers that the overall morale of the members of decentralized networks is higher than those of centralized networks. These findings make sense in view of research indicating that employees are more satisfied with their jobs when they have participated in decision making about them. Moreover, research shows that a member's position in the network can affect the personal satisfaction. Members in one more central position in the network tend to be more satisfied. This is obvious that when you are allowed to make the decisions, you are more satisfied. Thus, the research on communication pattern clearly indicates that effectiveness in the various groups. Therefore, communication is better when it is structured in some pattern. There might be some disadvantages in the communication patterns, but free flow of communication will bring many problems. Hence, the patterns of communication becomes important. Let us summarize whatever we have learnt here. Communication plays an important role in the social interaction. It is a unique social process as it is important for people to communicate their feelings, thoughts, emotions, etc. The process of communication consists of elements such as sender, message, encoding, channel of communication, decoding, then receiver, then feedback and noise. Communication will be effective when it flows through all these steps. Communication network is a pattern of direction in which information flows in a group. The different patterns of communication explained in this module are wheel pattern, chain pattern, Y pattern and circle pattern. In wheel pattern, one member of the group has very centralized position and this member interacts with all the other members of the group. The main advantage here is the communication problems are less and the method is quick. The chain pattern can be both vertical and horizontal communication. In this pattern, information flows in a set sequence. It is usually relevant in a group where hierarchy is very strong. Next, in Y pattern of communication, one person becomes more central than any other. The member at the fork of Y usually becomes the central problem in the communication process. Finally, the circle patterns give every member equal authority and power to influence the group. We have also seen some studies. Studies on communication patterns show that the effectiveness of the pattern depends on the situational factors such as speed, accuracy, morale, leadership, stability, organization and flexibility. Studies also reveal that communication patterns have an impact on group performance both in terms of achieving goals and its ability to satisfy the member of the group. Thus, with this information, we understand that communication is better when it is structured in some pattern. Though there are some disadvantages in these patterns, the free flow of communication will bring many more problems. Hence, the patterns of communication becomes important.